What's up, guys? I'm Lithex, CEO and founder of Lithex Productions, and today we're going to take a look at how we can make a simple first person controller with a new Unity input system. Hey guys, before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that we have some awesome merch being developed, and it's got our fancy logo and some other cool stuff out there. So just also let me know in the comments below what types of things you guys would like to see us making, and the most voted comment will be made, and the person who wrote the comment will get one for free. Yay! Okay, so let's just actually go on ahead and hop right into it. Uh, First off, quick disclaimer. Um, if you use this new Unity input system, it will overwrite the old system. So if you're updating an existing project, any code using that old system will no longer work and it'll need to be fixed. So first we need to get our new input system into Unity because it does not come in here standard. So we're going to click Window and we'll go down to Package Manager. Now this little drop down right here that says in project, we want to change that to Unity registry. And right here we'll type input. Yep, there it is, input system, and just click install. Now it's going to pop up and start doing some importing. Also, after the importing's done, we're going to get a little box that's going to ask us if we want to overwrite everything and disable the old stuff. We're just going to say yes. It'll also restart your Unity. So if yours restarts, don't freak out. That's supposed to happen. Um, Now, when this comes back up, we want to think about what are the two main things that happens when you make a first-person controller, right? So you have movement, which is normally WASD, and you can turn, which you normally do with the mouse, right? Obviously, unless you're working on consoles and stuff like that. But right now, we're just going to work based on PC controls. So now that we have this imported, uh, we want to just make a little character for now, right? So let's just create how about a cylinder? Okay, let's name this player, and we're gonna move it up on the Y position to 1.6, and we're gonna scale on the Y to 1.6. Okay, let's also create a plane so we can walk around on it. Let's scale that up. We'll do 10. There we go. Now let's drag our main camera under our player object. We're going to reset the transform on that camera, and we're going to zoom in and move it up to where it's just under the top here. And the reason you do it to where it's just under the top is so that way if you're hitting your head maybe on a roof or something, your camera's not clipping through the roof. Okay. So let's go on ahead and start putting this bad boy together. I'll just rename this plane as well. We'll just call it ground. That way it looks a little bit more organized, right? Okay, so let's make a script folder. And we're going to create a script called, let's do player input. Okay, let's open that up in Visual Studio. Move that over. Sweet. Okay, so we're just going to get rid of everything that we do not need right now. Let's get rid of that and these at the top. Okay, let's go on ahead and make our namespace. I'll do lp.fps controller new input tutorial. And I'm going to put this in a player. Well, we'll only have one script, so it doesn't really matter. Okay. And we're going to pop that right there in the middle. Okay, so now in order to use the new input system, since it's not standard, we need to add another using statement. So we're going to say using Unity engine input system. Okay, so in order to create some inputs here, we're just going to add it's called an input action. So we'll do serialize field, private input action, and we'll just call it movement. Okay. And actually right now, let's just save this now and hop back into Unity, and I'll show you what that does. So let's drag our player input onto our player, and I'm going to minimize this so you guys can see. Okay, so now we have this little box that popped up, this little movement area. So if we hit this little plus sign, we can add things. And these are kind of like a way to add key bindings to your inputs. So to move using WASD, that moves along two vectors, right? We're not really moving up into the sky. I mean, unless that's what your game's doing. So we're only going to be moving forward and side to side. So that's on the x-axis and the z-axis. So we're going to use a 2D vector composite. And then we have these things here. We have up, down, left, and right. So we're going to double click on up. We're going to add a path to W. So, and then make sure it says W keyboard. Okay. And then we have down. So we'll just do S and make sure it's S keyboard. Left, we'll do A for the keyboard. And right, we'll do D on the keyboard. So there we go. It's pretty much that simple to keybind what buttons are on what axis now. So that's pretty sweet. And now that we have that, let's go on ahead and hop back into our script and start putting some of this together. In order to do this, because of the new input system, we actually also have to enable and disable this stuff. So I'm going to do an onEnable, so private void onEnable, which is a Unity, it's a Unity function built in. It just happens when the script becomes active. So we'll do movement.enable, but not enabled. We don't want the boolean. We want the function. Okay. And then I'll also add on disable. Oops. Private. There we go. And then we'll just say movement disable. Okay. So now that makes it to where we can actually use it. Because without them, it will not work at all. So that's really important that you add those in there. Also, we're going to be using a character controller to move this. So above our class name, we're going to require a component type of character controller. Okay. This won't add it to our player since we already have the script on there, but it'll tell us if we don't end up adding it, it'll give us an error and be like, hey, you need to add your character controller. So that's pretty nice. And we need to grab a reference to this controller. So let's create a start function and just say, oh, we also need to put one here. So we'll go private character controller equals null. And then in start, we're going to say controller equals get component character controller. Okay, that's simple. Now, Let's actually make a speed variable so we can determine how fast we're actually going to walk and things like that. So let's do a public float speed, and I'm just going to set it to 5 for now. Just a random default. We can always change it later. And now we need to make a move function. So let's come down here and we'll say private void move. Oops. Sometimes autocomplete gets you. Okay, so in order to move, we're going to grab the inputs that we just set. So I'm going to create a new float. We'll just call this one X. Okay. And to grab those inputs, we're going to reference our input action. So we're going to say movement. Wow. Movement dot read value. And so we're going to read the value, and it's a vector 2. And so we want the x position, right? So vector2 dot x. Okay. Now when we're moving forward and back, we're actually moving on the z, but with w and s, it's actually reading on a y value. So what we want to do is say z is equal to movement dot read value vector 2 dot y. So we're reading the y, but we're going to make it a z. Okay. So let's create a vector 3 for our movement, and we'll just call it direction is equal to transform dot right times x plus transform dot forward times z. And the reason we're using transform right and forward is because if we just move along the x and z axis, when we turn our camera while we're holding forward, we're still going to be only moving in one direction. So instead, we're moving based on transform right and forward. So now we'll always be moving forward rather than just on Z, right? Okay. Um, so we actually need to make this happen, right? So we're going to use our controller, controller dot move, which is the character controller function. And we're going to move in the direction times our speed times time dot delta time. Okay, and that should be enough to move us around. So let's hop back into Unity. Since we don't have our character controller, let's go on ahead and add one. There we go. I'm not going to change anything on that. We also don't need this collider, so we can remove component on that collider. Now, if we hit play, we should be able to move around. Oh, but you're not really going to be able to see that because we don't have any references to that. So let's make it to where we can see that we're moving. So our player's facing in that way. So I'm just gonna make a couple cubes. We're gonna reset the transform, move it over, up a little bit. There we go. And I'm gonna hit Control D to duplicate and just add a couple cubes to show that we have distance happening. Okay, let's hit play. And then it appears that we are not moving. So actually we need to create an update function and put move into our function. Okay, now we can move. There we go. So now we can move forward and back with W and S, and then A and D move left and right. And so the cool thing about this new input system is if you hit W and D at the same time, all this is already normalized. You don't actually have to normalize this anymore, which is really cool. All right. So now that we have that, we need to add a way to start being able to turn. So let's add a few things that we're going to be needing for this. First of all, we need to, oops, add another input action. Okay, and we'll just call this, I don't know, turning, right? That makes it simple. And before we add more, let's hop into Unity just like we did before last time. So now we have this turning one, right? So we'll hit the plus button. And this time, we're actually going to add this as a binding because what we want to bind here is the delta of our mouse. We want the change of what our mouse is, not necessarily the 2D vector. We just want to know the change of what our mouse has done. So now let's take that back into our player input script. And now we'll add a couple things that we're going to need. So something we need to think about as well is when we rotate our character left and right, but we rotate our camera up and down, right? So with that in mind, we want to create a turning function, right? So we'll do private void turn. And let's make a couple variables that we're going to need for this. So along with speed, we're going to need some mouse sensitivity. Let's do a public float mouse sensitivity. And we'll just set it to 100 for now. Also, we want to be able to reference our camera because we have to rotate our camera, right? So we'll do private camera, we'll call it cam, and we'll throw that in this, we'll grab that in our start function. So we'll just say cam is equal to cam, oops, I typed to, equal to camera dot main. Okay, so that grabs our camera. We also want a variable here for our camera. We're going to call this camera rotation. Okay, I'll just set it to 0 at the start. Okay, so now that we have what we're going to use, we can hop down into our turn function and start putting some of this together. So we'll do a lot like what we did here, where we set an x and a z. So let's do, we'll call it mouse x. Mouse x is equal to, and now we're going to grab this input value. So turning dot read value, and this is still reading on a 2D vector, just purely because that's the only thing that a mouse is going to read on. So we're going to read the vector 2. And we want the x to be an x. But we're going to multiply this by our mouse sensitivity, and then again by time dot delta time. And then we'll do the same thing, but for our mouse y. And we'll do turning dot read value vector 2 dot y times mouse sensitivity times time dot delta time. Okay, now that we have those, we're going to set our camera rotation variable. And we're going to do minus, oh, I guess my hand hit a trackpad there. We'll do minus equals, and we're going to set it to mouse Y. Okay. Now, while we're looking up and down, if we just keep forever looking up, our camera is going to turn all the way around, and we'll just keep spinning infinitely, and we don't want that. So we're going to clamp this. So we'll do cam rotation is equal to mathf.clamp, and we're going to clamp cam rotation to a minimum of, let's say, -90 and a maximum of 90. Okay. Now we can actually start rotating things. So let's rotate our camera's transform. We want to rotate its local rotation. Okay. And so it's going to be a quaternion dot Euler. Okay. And it's going to be camera 0, 0. So we're rotating this across the X axis. So we got the X, so that way it'll actually rotate on that and look up and down. And then we have to rotate our player if we want to look left and right. So we're going to rotate the transform, and we're just going to do transform.rotate. Okay. And we're going to rotate on vector 3 up times mouse X. Sweet. Now we need to actually remember how important I said this stuff was. So we need to enable our turning. So turning dot enable. Okay, and then turning dot disable. We also need to add our turn to our update function. Okay, looking good, looking good. Also, with FPS controller, you don't have your mouse on the screen. You don't want it flying off the screen and clicking different things. So in order to lock that in position in the center, we're going to do cursor dot lock state is equal to cursor lock mode dot locked. Now that's just going to hold the mouse in the center of the screen. But we don't actually want to see the mouse either, right? We want to make some sort of custom cursor, or maybe you make your cursor on your mouse. Either way, I'm going to hide it for now. So in order to do that, I'm going to do cursor, cursor dot visible equals false. And then we'll save that. And we can now hop back into Unity and give her a whirl. Okay. So interestingly enough, it looks like my mouse is still visible, but that's okay. Just a little bug going on. Not that big of a deal. We can fix it later, but there you go. You can actually look around. We can look left, right, up, and it gets clamped, so we stay looking at the sky. Go down, it gets clamped while we're looking at the ground, and we can move around our obstacles. And there you go. That's it. So I can't wait to see what you guys do with your games using the new input system. Let me know in the comments below as well. Do you like the new input system? Is it too much? Is it maybe too big of a change? Too fast? Are things just too awkward? I'm really interested in hearing your guys' thoughts on this. And also, big thanks to my Patreon subscribers. You guys are really helping out the channel a lot. And if you aren't a patron and you still want to support the channel, then hit that subscribe button, smash like on the video, leave comments. That helps a ton. And you guys have been helping out with that a lot, and you guys are so awesome. But yeah, Let me know what you think of the new system, and until next time, guys, peace.